We are starting today's video in the year 2004 in the city of Sasebo. Sasebo is based in Nagasaki Prefecture, and it is the second largest city in the prefecture after its capital Nagasaki. It was also formerly a fishing village. The city itself is a sight to behold and features the magnificent Sakai National Park, which consists of over 400 islands and is rich in fishing grounds. Located in the southern part of the city is a Dutch-style theme park which recreates the Netherlands by displaying life-sized copies of old Dutch buildings. In 2015, the Henna Hotel or Strange Hotel was opened on site. It is the world's first hotel staffed by robots, though initially humans will work alongside them. In 1945, so way back when, Sasebo suffered severe damage by bombing during World War II, and the city was destroyed by 48%. Sasebo was one of the original 17 targets for the dropping of the atomic bomb, so the city has had its fair share of trauma. And in 2004, a string of murders was to add to that. It was a typical school day at Sasebo City Okubo Elementary School in Yumi Haridake, a mountain region in Sasebo. The kids had been trying their best to keep their eyes glued to the teacher all morning, but every now and again a stomach growl suggested that a much-needed lunch break was just around the corner. When the kids scurried off to enjoy their bento boxes, something very sinister was happening inside one of the empty classrooms. As lunch wrapped up, and kids began to return to their respective classrooms, one teacher realized that two of the kids in their classroom hadn't returned. It was then that he heard the sound of someone running in the hallway. He immediately stepped outside the room to check, and that is when he saw one of the girls standing there with a knife and blood-soaked handkerchief in her hands, her clothes too covered in blood. At first, the teacher thought that perhaps the girl had cut herself, but she quickly assured him that the blood on her clothes wasn't in fact hers. Instead, she pointed to a classroom approximately 50 meters north of her 6th grade classroom. There, the teacher found a girl of similar age, covered in blood. The victim, whose throat and arms had been slit with a box cutter knife, was 12-year-old Mitarai Satomi, who had actually been friends with the perpetrator. Shortly after, the perpetrator, only known as Girl A, was arrested. After being taken into custody, Girl A reportedly confessed to the crime, saying, I am sorry," to police, having been questioned until 7 p.m. that day. When they spoke to the 11-year-old perpetrator, officials found out that she had had a brief friendship with Satomi. The two took the same bus to school and used to attend the same basketball classes together. But more recently, their friendship had moved online, and as is often the case with kids, the two eventually began to quarrel over something really dumb. Girl A expressed that she was upset with the fact that other kids, which included Satomi, made use of an expression which she had invented and was using herself. When Girl A prohibited the use of this expression, Satomi disagreed, and this in turn annoyed Girl A. It seems from accounts that Satomi then slandered the perpetrator online, making fun of her weight and calling her a goody two-shoes. Girl A had always been known to be a regular, healthy, well-adjusted child, one of those kids that annoy others for being seemingly perfect. According to the perpetrator, she had asked Satomi to stop writing nonsense about her, but she wouldn't, and that led to Girl A hacking into a webpage that Satomi used. When she did, she changed her avatar to a pumpkin picture, and Satomi then realized it had been hacked. Girl A later changed the avatar picture back to whatever it was before, but the arguments continued. After her arrest, Girl A then spent the first night at the police station, refusing to eat, and she was also often heard crying. Remember, she was only 11 years old. Eventually, police asked her to recall the day of the crime, and this is how it all went down. On July the 1st, Girl A asked Satomi to meet her in a classroom on the 3rd floor while prepping lunch after the morning lessons. When Satomi complied, the perpetrator drew the curtains, while Satomi presumably sat in a chair. Girl A then covered Satomi's eyes with her right arm, and then cut her neck and left arm with her left from behind. Satomi wiggled out of her seat, stood up, and tried to defend herself, though she sadly didn't succeed. The wound she inflicted on poor Satomi's neck was 10 centimeters in depth and about 10 centimeters in length, deep enough to see the bone. Prior to deciding on murdering Satomi with the knife, the perpetrator had considered strangulation and stabbing with an ice pick, before deciding on a knife attack, having seen a similar murder displayed in a drama series on TV the night before. After Satomi collapsed, Girl A, she didn't leave the room right away. She spent 15 minutes in there actually trying to wipe the blood off her clothes and face with a handkerchief. When the teacher later entered, he desperately tried to stop the bleeding while shouting, "Ambulance! Ambulance!" At this point, Satomi was still breathing, and there was blood all over the floor and walls. Her glasses had been removed and placed on a nearby desk. The teachers then quickly closed the classroom door and drew the curtains to stop other school kids from seeing the horrific scene. A teacher in the nearby 3rd-year classroom who heard the scream rushed to the staff room and reported the incident to the vice principal. The vice principal obviously struggled to comprehend what had happened and actually passed Girl A on his way to the crime scene. When he got there, he immediately called 911, but the ambulance took forever to arrive, despite the fire station being only 4 kilometers away. So he called again. When the ambulance eventually arrived, they decided not to transfer Satomi to the hospital and contacted police. It seemed that they had arrived too late. Authorities then questioned all the kids for 15 minutes each until approximately 6 p.m. And at 8:30 p.m. police announced that this was now a murder case. The next day, Girl A awoke and had a bento box meal before questioning resumed. In the afternoon, Nakamura Masanori, the director of the Sasebo Child Guidance Center, and Tateishi Akira, director of the Nagasaki Prefectural Board of Education, held a press conference. In it, they remarked that from speaking to the perpetrator, she came across as a regular girl. The perpetrator grew up in a family of 5 in a village on the hillside of Yumiharidake. There, she lived with her parents, an older sister, and her grandmother. Her father used to work at a local gift shop, but sadly suffered a stroke when Girl A was only 2. He then spent years in recovery while working odd jobs. Because her dad was so unwell, the perpetrator's grandmother stepped in to help raise her. While her father was ill, Girl A, according to him, would always encourage him and care for him to make him feel better, and he described her as a very sweet child. It was later reported, and this was by no means proven, but it was reported that the girl was abused by her father. He disputed this, of course. However, at the time of the murder, the perpetrator's sister, who was a high school student, had actually left her hometown alongside her mother and grandmother, as she was prepping to get her high school diploma. So Girl A was alone with her father. Despite this, Girl A always excelled at school and was a hard worker. She was always on time in class and participated in lessons, even asking for more work on top of her homework, as she often found herself bored in class. Girl A was also a member of the computer research department and took part in many club activities. She also joined the local mini basketball club, basically basketball for kiddos, which she enjoyed but had to quit in the 3rd semester of 5th grade to make more time for her studies. This was especially hard on her and further isolated her. She was pretty much only left with the internet to connect with friends. Personality-wise, she was serious, though timid, and struggled to speak up for herself. She had a particularly hard time saying no, even if she found herself in trouble, which is why getting bullied online and actually trying to make the bullying stop was such a big deal for her. Girl A did have some friends, and she would occasionally have them over to play Pokemon or Super Smash Bros, which, best games ever, okay? She also had her very own computer, loved Hello Kitty, and really enjoyed to read horror novels and watch anime. It was later thought that her extensive reading of horror novels encouraged a change in her demeanor, though it's likely much more complicated than that. However, she was a huge fan of the Battle Royale novel and its subsequent film adaptation, which follows a group of junior high school students that are forced to fight to the death by the Japanese totalitarian government. But despite having some friends, she hadn't made the best experiences with other kids and preferred to spend time alone. At school, she would often be chased by other kids, knocked over or kicked. She got pranked all the time and she really found it hard to forgive. Remember, she was just 11. And hell, I'm an adult and I find it hard to forgive. Authorities also unearthed an essay she wrote when she was 10, in which she said that she hopes not to be so afraid anymore as an adult. And shortly after, her behavior indeed began to change. Now, Girl A has always had a good reputation, as previously mentioned, but at the end of 5th grade, she began to lash out at fellow classmates. She would hit them and also take out her frustration and anger on herself by hitting her head against walls repeatedly. And this was 2 months before the murder and also the time when she started to withdraw into herself. I mean, she always spent time alone a lot, but people would always see her sitting alone outside, just with her thoughts really. And not much later, everything kicked off. On June the 3rd, the perpetrator then met with a lawyer at the Nagasaki Juvenile Classification Center. There, she ate mostly rice and miso soup and usually finished her whole meal. She also had a room to herself and enjoyed reading during her time spent there. When she spoke to the lawyer, she told them that she'd always worried alone and thought alone. There wasn't anyone in her family or friend circle to talk to when she was having a hard time. The lawyer then asked her how she viewed herself, and she said that she viewed herself as an average girl in many ways. She then also spoke about the crime and slightly contradicted herself. First, saying that had she really thought about the crime on a deeper level, she would have never murdered anyone. But this of course contradicts what she told police before, namely that she did think about how to commit the murder for many days prior to doing it. However, having had time in that room to think, perhaps what she meant was that when actually not acting from a place of anger, she wouldn't have done it. I don't know, again, she was 11. Either way, she said that she feels sorry and that she would like to apologize to Satomi and her own parents for causing them so much trouble. Speaking of her future life at the time, she hoped to live a normal life in the future. One lawyer later said that meeting the perpetrator, though she was in 6th grade of elementary, she came across much younger, and he'd have placed her in 4th grade had he not known any better. Another attorney said she came across very young, was short, and her facial expressions were childlike. Well, she was 11, hello. The lawyer then also concluded that a psychological appraisal wasn't necessary, as Girl A appeared quite normal. On June the 4th, her parents then came to see her. Her dad asked if she was okay and she slowly nodded, while her mother cried during pretty much the whole visit. On June the 7th, at around 7 p.m., the victim's father's agent held a press conference at Sasebo City Hall, and a day later, legal proceedings against Girl A officially began. They first decided on a psychological examination, and results were in on June the 23rd. This is when the perpetrator was officially diagnosed with Asperger's. If you don't know what that is, Asperger's is a form of autism spectrum disorder, and it is essentially a developmental disorder. Young people with Asperger's tend to have a difficult time relating to others socially, and their behavior and thinking patterns can be rigid and repetitive. The proceedings then lasted until September, but as this case concerned a minor, were mostly kept private. Then, on September the 15th, the Nagasaki family court in Sasebo ruled to institutionalize Girl A, putting aside her young age because of the severity of the crime. She was hence sent to a reformatory school in Tochigi Prefecture. The Nagasaki family court originally sentenced Girl A to 2 years of involuntary commitment, but the sentence was extended by 2 years in September 2006 following a psychological evaluation. She was then also awarded her elementary school diploma in 2005, as one is required in Japan to enter junior high school, and the school believed it would aid her reintegration into society. Unlike many penal systems abroad, Japan's penal system intends to re-socialize, reform, and rehabilitate offenders, hoping to reintegrate them into society rather than keep them locked up forever. On May 29, 2008, local authorities announced that they did not seek an additional sentence in girl A's case, and she graduated from junior high and pretty much restarted her life. But while she was allowed to practically start from scratch, let's not forget that Satomi's family was left to live a life without their beloved little girl. Satomi grew up in Nagasaki and moved to Sasebo when she was in 4th grade. She lived there with her father and brother, while her oldest brother attended university in Tokushima Prefecture. Sadly, her mother had died just 3 years before the incident, so you can imagine what this did to this poor family. Satomi was generally regarded as a good girl. She was well-mannered and nice, and her father was actually familiar with the perpetrator. He had driven the girls around town on many occasions, and girl A also visited their home. Both Satomi and the perpetrator had been really into computer studies, and since girl A was very advanced in her knowledge of computers, Satomi almost came to see her as her mentor. Satomi's brother has since said that he would have liked the perpetrator to apologize, now that she is aware of what she has done given her age, and then never see her again. Whether she has done that, I do not know. The murder also provoked a debate in Japan whether the age of criminal responsibility, which had been lowered from 16 to 14 in the year 2000 due to the 1997 Kobe child murders, as per my previous video, needed to be lowered yet again. However, that hasn't happened.